Hi, my name is Robert Chelle with Chelle Law, and my law firm assists nurses with nursing board issues. One question I get quite frequently is how long does discipline stay on a nurse's record? Well, first, this is very state dependent. So each state may have their own kind of policy on how long the discipline will stay up. So this is state dependent, but this will be kind of a general discussion of discipline and then, where it's reported and then how long does it stay up. So first, you need to define what discipline is. And so every state's going to have unprofessional conduct. And even though a board has issued a decision against the nurse, it doesn't always mean it's formal disciplinary action. So in most states, there's some kind of, it could be called a letter of concern, an advisory letter. There's some kind of low level, document that goes to the nurse that's not considered formal discipline and then won't be reported to the national databases. So NurseSys and then the National Practitioner Database as well. There could also be some kind of non-disciplinary continuing education order. In that scenario, that's not reported either. So what we're talking about today is if you've been given formal discipline, so either some kind of decree of censure, a civil penalty, letter of reprimand, the probation, suspension, revocation, voluntary surrender, all of these things are considered formal discipline, and all of them will be reported to the national databases. There are a few states left that host their own reporting. And in that scenario, it's really up to the board how long they want to keep the discipline up on their website. But the national data banks have some very set standards. And so let's just take nurses, for example. If a nurse is disciplined, receives disciplinary action, it's then reported to that database. And if anyone were to verify the license of that nurse, all the states their license would pop up, and then any discipline they received would pop up as well. And it would state what happened, the date of it, and then many times they'll link the actual document so someone can just pull it up and look. Now, if your state has no mechanism for expunging or removing discipline, it will stay up on there permanently. There's no way of removing it. Like, for instance, I live in Arizona, represent Arizona nurses before the board, and we have no way of expunging a case, removing discipline. And so right now, if any nurse is reported to NurseSys or the National Practitioner Database, there is no way of removing that discipline. It's there forever, which is pretty frustrating for a nurse. The only way that we could get that changed would be some kind of, change in the law. We'd have to lobby with, state officials and try to get some kind of change to the law so that we can have cases expunged or removed after a period of time. But right now, we can't. So it's very likely if you've been given formal discipline that it will stay on your record either permanently or for a fairly long period of time. It's not fair. It's not fair. If you were disciplined 20 years ago and this will just follow you around for the rest of your career, it's just not fair. And so the reasons why it can come up, one, if any employer verifies your license and it pops up, they're going to see it. Two, most job applications will state, have you ever been formally disciplined by a licensing board? Now, in that case, even if you're in a state where it can be removed, you'll likely have to answer affirmatively to that question because it did happen. But having the license verification available for anyone to see and pull up and read the facts of the situation, something that happened a very long time ago, nurses had no problems for a decade or two. It's just tough to have to deal with that for the rest of your career. People make mistakes, just becomes a nurse is formally disciplined doesn't mean they're a bad nurse, doesn't mean there's some kind of behavioral problem with them. People screw up in medicine all of the time. And most of the time, it's not some kind of, act that the nurse meant to do. It could just be an honest mistake that led to some kind of discipline, but it will still follow them around for the rest of their career. I wish I had better news. If you have been formally disciplined, it likely will stick around for a very long time. So how to handle that with an employer? Well, if you have been formally disciplined and the employer is going to find out about it and obviously ask you about it, then you need to have a story to deal with it. You need to say, this is where I was in my life at the time. This is what happened. And these are the things that I've done to make certain it doesn't happen again. That's what the employer wants to hear. They don't want to hear a bunch of excuses. They don't want a big, long, complicated story. They want to hear the nurse say, I screwed up. I was disciplined for it. I learned from it. Here are the things I've learned, and here's why it's not going to happen again. Now, maybe there are some situations where the nurse can just, kind of talk their way around, well, this wasn't my fault for these reasons. But I find for the most part, the most effective way of dealing with it is just to straightforward, I screwed up, I learned from it, and I won't do it again. That's what the employer wants to know. Any employer wants to know that a nurse is coachable, or as far as the boards call it, regulatable. So they just want to see that you can recognize if there's been issues, that this is something that you've kind of grown from. It's very hard for some nurses to kind of swallow their pride, admit that they screwed up. And this goes for any profession. I'm not singling out nurses here. It's just hard for people who are professionals to admit an error or that they screwed up in some way. But it's the best way of handling a situation like that, especially if it's remote. It's something that happened decades ago. An employer, if they're a good employer, they're going to understand things happen, and they're going to show compassion to a nurse who's just explaining the situation and I guess establishing that they've grown from it. Well, hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions, you can always call my law firm at the phone number listed below, or you can reach us through our website, chellelaw.com. It's a sub forum in Arizona, so I can only assist nurses in Arizona. However, I think this is probably good general information for any nurse out there. So appreciate you watching the video. Thanks.